Welcome back to The Agenda with your Missoula County Commissioners. I'm Juanita Vero, and I'm here with my fellow commissioners, Dave Strohmeyer and Josh Slotnick. Today, we're joined by Jill Bonney, the director of the Poverello Center, which is celebrating its 50th year.
Yes, it's exciting.
This year.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
To you and your organization.
I was going to say I haven't been around that long, but I have been around that long, just not at the POV.
Me too.
Yeah. There's a few of us who have been around at least that long. What was happening 50 years ago at the POV?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story, and I think, we have an interactive exhibit at the library that we can talk about a little bit, but when we started to prepare for this and looked for stories, it's been really fun. And so in 1974, the POV started, and it was just serving food on Pine Street, right here on Pine Street.
Do you know what sort of community conversations were happening back then in 1974?
I just know that they had people that were hungry, and so they wanted to feed people. And so there was a Knights of Columbus building here on Pine Street.
Do you know where on Pine Street?
The Knights of Columbus building currently is down
I'm
East
sure
Pine
that was
Street,
it.
So
Yeah.
pillars in the front.
So that was the original POV.
Yeah, that was the original. It was less than a year that the POV was there. It's interesting. They say the first 4 days they served a bowl of soup to one man each day. That was the only individual that came. And then word got around and people started coming. And
where did the name Poverello come from? What does it mean?
It means little
word?
Poor man.
Oh, okay.
Is it in Catholicism?
Okay.
The POV now is not a religious organization, but it was back then. And so that's really where it started, was a bunch of church ladies that got together and wanted to feed individuals in the community.
So today, there is no connection with the Catholic Church?
There's not.
Formally, at least?
No. And, there are a lot of shelters around the state that are connected to religious organizations. We're not, and really feel like that's important so that anyone and everyone feels comfortable to come, whether you're connected to religion or church or not. And it's interesting, St. Francis Church was involved with us at the very beginning, back 50 years ago. And to this day, St. Francis Church comes to the POV, and there's a group of individuals from that church that makes hundreds of sack lunches a couple times a week.
A couple times a week?
A couple times a week for all of this time. They've been involved with some way of serving food at the POV.
And I've not had a chance to take a look at the display at the library.
It's pretty
I'd
great.
like to hear
Great
more
photos.
about that. But I guess based on the exhibit that talk about the history of the POV, are there some specific key milestones in the past 50 years that stand out to you as inflection points in terms of the mission and vision of the POV?
I think some of the things that I definitely didn't realize is how many times the POV moved locations. So there was the Knights of Columbus, and then it moved down the street on Pine to June Kenny's home. She was involved from the very beginning. And then there was a zoning battle. Imagine that.
No way.
And the POV then had to relocate yet again. After that is when it moved to 535 Ryman, which is where it was for
forever.
40 years. Yeah. So that was really interesting to me, like all the times that it moved, and some of the reasons why it moved are the same reasons that organizations move today. And then it was in 2014 when we moved to the new building on Broadway. And really, I was at the building and I was with the POV just long enough, I always say, on Ryman to really appreciate the new building. But I remember, we were probably sleeping between 80 and 100 people at that location. And
at Ryman. Mm-hmm. So essentially the same number. Wow.
It was packed, and we would have to step over people to come in. I remember the women could not take showers while the kitchen was running. So they'd have to wait until the afternoon to take showers because we couldn't have water running in both places.
There just wasn't enough water pressure?
Right. And hot water. We needed all the hot water for the kitchen. So the men's dorm could do it, but the women's couldn't. And so when we moved down to this location, we created 120 beds and thought, we have never slept over 100 people. We're going to be fine with 120 beds. And very quickly, we were not.
Like within a year, or when you say very quickly, what?
Within a year. Yeah.
Wow.
Yep. It was
at
very
capacity.
quickly.
Yep. Immediately.
As a little bit of an aside, I can think back pre-pandemic to discussions of the 30 permanently supportive housing units at Blue Heron or Trinity, thinking that's
really really
really going to
put a dent.
Yeah, that's going to take a huge dent out of the challenge that we have experienced. And, well, a few years later, I think it's clear that has not solved all of our challenges.
So, Jill, in the time that you've been with the POV, besides the added pressure and the growth, what are some other things that have changed?
Some of the other things we've changed, I mean, we had a pandemic in the middle of that, right? Yeah. And so I remember pre-pandemic, we really were trying to look at policies within the shelter that would be the most beneficial for people that were staying there and help them move into housing. And so we were really working on diversion, which helps people try to figure out a solution with like a friend or family member so that they don't need to come to the shelter. Sometimes people can stay on someone's couch for a little bit, can borrow $100 from someone. So we really had these conversations around diversion. And then also we're really talking to people about housing. And then COVID happened and we shifted and just wanted to keep people safe and alive and fed and healthy and stop talking about those things as much. And now that we are coming out of the pandemic, they still say coming out of the pandemic because it shows its ugly face every once in a while. We are looking back at how do we start talking to people about housing now that housing is becoming available, talking about diversion. And one of the things that I think is interesting that I know you guys talked to Bryce Ward on the last episode is where he talks about that informal safety net and how people just don't have that as much as they used to, which is really what's
the relationship
necessary.
Skills.
Yeah.
Or relationship maintenance skills.
Mm-hmm. The relationship skills, the people they can fall back on, whoever's going to let them sleep on their couch or lend them $100. You know, that just isn't there in the way that it has been in years past. You know, some of that informal safety net was churches, and people aren't all going to churches as much as they have in the past. Some of that is people are not volunteering as much as they used to. We even see that with our volunteers. As I read that report, I was like, yep, I can see that. I can see that. And so we're just not seeing people be as connected in ways that can be beneficial to them when they hit a crisis and need some support.
Yeah, we are a far lonelier and isolated society than we once were. But we're way plugged in, which is totally awesome.
Yeah.
I don't know,
way plugged in.
Can you hear the dripping sarcasm? I don't know.
Yeah.
Let's talk about Ninth Circuit.
Yeah.
I don't even know where you want to begin.
Yeah. What do you think?
On what exactly the Ninth Circuit is or what it does?
So this decision, this by now often referenced decision from Boise, I believe Boise versus Martin, where the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals said local jurisdictions cannot ticket people for camping on public land when those very same jurisdictions do not also provide a place for someone to be.
Correct.
Now, this decision was the law of the land for quite a while, and then a similar issue happened in Grants Pass, Oregon, and that decision made its way all the way to the Supreme Court, and we should know what they have to say coming later this summer. If the Supreme Court does as I would wager, they're going to say, yeah, go ahead, doesn't matter if you have places or not, it's illegal, local jurisdictions can enforce no camping. What do you think will ensue here?
Gosh, it's so hard to know.
If you had your druthers, and I think that's ultimately what we're all looking for, would be solutions. Well, what has actually worked elsewhere, and clearly, if you're imposing a fine on someone who has no money, and that's not going to elicit the change that you want, what else can we do as a community in those sorts of, let's just talk briefly about those sorts of more extreme situations where there does appear to be a nexus between environmental degradation or public safety and health and someone camped where they are camped.
Yeah, I mean, homelessness isn't good for any of us, right? It's not good for the economy. It's not good for the environment. It's not good for the people that are experiencing it. I think the biggest thing that we need to do is tell people where outdoors they can be. It's a much different conversation if you go up to someone and say, hey, you're too close to the water. This can cause degradation along the water line. If you could move to this other area, this would be an okay place for you to be. And that place also includes a place for you to use the restroom and throw away your garbage. Then that's a completely different conversation than we need you to move away from the water. I don't know where you can go. and the person is like, what do I do? I don't know what to do. Where am I supposed to go? I don't know where, but not here. Like those two things are completely different conversations. And I know not everyone is going to take that first conversation well, but I think most people will be like, if you can help tell me where I can be, I will go to that location.
We learned a similar lesson along another type of human behavior often complained about and yet advocated for, and that's parking. When we said, you can't park here, without giving people an option of where they could park, they kept parking illegally.
And this isn't parking overnight. You're talking about recreational
I'm talking about
access
recreational parking.
Yeah.
And I'm by no means making an exact equivalency between parking and someone who's desperately living outside. I'm just reinforcing your point that if we say no somewhere, we also have to say yes, or the no just moves around. So we at the county and the city, in a moment of pretty intense need, came up with the ACS. It lived for a short time. We learned some lessons. We also came up with the TSOS, and we've learned some lessons there.
Authorized campsite and temporary safe outdoor
authorized
space.
campsite would be basically a place where you can camp, where there's bathrooms, garbage, sharps, etc. And then temporary safe outdoor space that we run in partnership with Hope Rescue Mission and United Way, where it's smaller, hard-sided shelters where people are living in for months on end until they kind of graduate to more permanent housing. We've learned a lot of lessons from both these things. What of those lessons would you want to apply to the creation of a new place where we're saying, yes, you could camp here?
Those two places are completely different.
Yes.
And so the authorized camping site, I think, grew to be too big, which is easy.
So scale is important.
Yeah, it's really important to keep scale
What kind
small.
of numbers? What seems to
40
work?
to 45. It shouldn't be any bigger, any larger than that. And that's total number of people. And I think that is
We do that at TSOS.
Yes, and that's what, when you see other programs like this around the country that work, it is smaller scaled ones. You know, Spokane had one that got to be 600 people.
Oh my.
Yeah, and it was a big
In
problem.
Montana, that could be its own county.
I know, right? Yeah, and so keeping it small. But I think the big thing that's the difference between the two, aside from accommodations, right? They've got hard-sided shelters and have some heat source and things like that at TSOS, and services, right? So they have someone who's working with them and helping them complete their goals and move into housing. At the authorized camping site, that wasn't the intention from the beginning, and that's okay because some people are not yet at the place in their journey where they're ready for TSOS, right? So I think we need different options for different people who are in different places in their journey or just have different needs. There are many people that stayed at the authorized camping site that will never go to TSOS. They're just not going to be ready for a program like that. And so we need to be able to provide an option for those individuals.
So do you think there should be some level of services or human presence other than the campers at this type of site?
I do.
What would that look like?
You know, there's a lot of talk about other places where they have kind of some self-governed system.
That totally just depends on the cast of characters that you have to work with.
Right. So I think having some staff that can then guide people to be able to do some of their self-government, but not on their own. So like, we're going to help mentor you through being able to have this role at an authorized site, but you are not 100% in control. So you're not going to keep a campsite at 40 to 45 people if you don't have someone overseeing it. You're not going to make sure that structures are not built and you're in line with the fire department's regulations without someone. There needs to be some rules
to enforce the rules.
Yes.
Jill, can you point to a place in the country that is actually doing what you think is on the right track?
I think there's some places in California doing this. I would have to go back and tell you exactly what cities. Also, I know that there are some locations in Washington that have tried this, and I think some have worked, some haven't.
I think so much of it must depend not just on the resources, but the people.
I was going to say
it's the people.
The phrase
It's the
you used,
people.
you said cast of characters. That's
Yes.
got it. If you only have 35 people, it's going to mean a lot if they're 35 cooperative or not.
Yeah, or even with your service providers, like having the right personality or skill set to be able to manage.
And if you have 35
That's-
people in one location that say, we are really committed to not using substances and being sober, and this is what we really want to do and we want to work with each other on that, then you keep them together. And if you have others that are like, we're not in that place yet and we can behave, but we want to be able to have a couple beers, then you keep those individuals together. And so really being thoughtful around who is in which location, I think is really important.
Jill, I want to shift just a little bit to something we not infrequently hear from our constituents across the county, and that is the old phrase, build it and they will come. And recognizing you're in the trenches, you are running into folks on probably a daily basis that are in the POV for maybe a whole variety of reasons. What's your perception in terms of, we heard a little bit from Bryce in terms of statistics and the research that he's done on this topic, but just anecdotally, are there folks who are coming here from elsewhere across the nation because they've heard that Missoula, Montana has such great services that they want to be here, versus folks who are finding themselves houseless or homeless who call Missoula home and have for maybe many years?
Yeah, it's interesting. And we hear that all the time also. We do see people from surrounding rural areas that come because there are not services. But if you think about someone in Texas saying, I'm going to go to Missoula because they have such great services, there's 20 cities between Texas and us that have better services than what we have and have warmer weather. Like, it just doesn't make sense. But we also see people who are driving through and they have car trouble and they get stranded and they don't have money to fix their car, and then they hear. You can talk to them and they're like, I've been here for 6 months because of this. And it's like, you just need an alternator for your car? Okay. How do we help you get that? But there are also a lot of individuals that have been here forever. There are individuals that are coming back here that have been here before. I have staff members that will be like, I know this person is from Missoula because I went to Hellgate High School with them. Wow. And so really we have a lot of people that are from here or their connections are from here. I do have a story of a gal that I know who grew up in the Flathead Valley, and she moved away and went to college and then lived away from home for 5 or 6 years. And she met a partner and they had a baby and they broke up and she needed support. And so she came home. And so she is not back in the Flathead Valley, but she's in Montana, she and her baby. And so does she count as Montanan or local? You know, it's like, who counts and who doesn't? Because she's just coming back to where her support system is. But if you talk to her and said, where do you come from? She might say Washington. But that doesn't mean that's where she grew up.
Interesting.
So, Jill, one of the things we heard from Bryce in the podcast you mentioned is that doing nothing costs $7,000 to $10,000 per homeless person. What do you think we could be doing to prevent people from falling into homelessness? And imagine that you get to be czar of Missoula for a few days and you have all kinds of resources. What would that prescription look like?
Oh, all kinds of resources. Affordable housing and higher wages. But I do think the Housing Solutions Fund.
Yeah,
because
we're
talking Housing Solutions
We're talking
Fund.
about preventing homelessness.
Yes. So the Housing Solution Fund has been wonderful for people
Can you
to be
describe
able to
how it
use.
works?
Yeah. So let's say I had a car repair this month, and because of that, I can't pay my rent. And I'm afraid that then I will become homeless, but I just need help with 1 month's rent, and then I can pick it back up on my own. And so you can call 211 and you can ask to take part in the Housing Solutions Fund and get some money from that. And it's one time. I think the amount that you can get depends upon how much funding they have at the time, but they have helped hundreds of families not then become homeless.
And this is a United Way program, right?
It is, yep. And then administered through 211.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. So more money to the Housing Solutions Fund.
Yeah.
Because didn't they get tapped out last year?
It did. Yeah. People utilize it and then it's gone, and then they get some more and then they utilize it and it's gone. But they're definitely helping many, many people while there's funds available, which means those people are not coming to our door.
What's something that we can do, or not Missoula County Commissioners necessarily, but our listeners.
And could I throw in something just on top of that? In the spirit of what our listeners can do, here's an example of a question that I have, because virtually every day walking to the office, someone will ask me for money downtown. Not an infrequent thing. And I've heard from other community members who have had the same question. What should their response be? People who want to help. And it absolutely is the case that there is a spirit of generosity in Missoula. And I guess along the lines of anything else that you can think of that our listeners can do to be involved and help out. In this specific case, should I open my wallet there on the street corner, or is there a better response and way that I could be involved?
I think it's better to connect people to resources. And so to say, I'd love to help you out, but are you aware that the Poverello Center is providing 3 meals a day? Have you tried to get a meal from there? And if they say, I can't go to the POV, let them know about the homeless outreach team. They'd be happy to bring a sack lunch to someone who's not able to come. And so I think because that's not only connecting them to that meal, but it's also connecting them to people who are going to be supportive, and that almost that informal safety net in a community at a shelter, right? And so then they could be like, this isn't so bad. I will just stay here and be out of the cold. They could get connected by something they see on the bulletin board that helps them get housing or a job. And they could just sit down and rest a little bit that's not on the street. So I think connecting them is the biggest thing. That's what I do if someone approaches me for money, is say, are you aware of the Poverello Center, and do you know that we're serving 3 meals a day, and there's a hot meal served at Johnson Street every day? And so these are places where you can get food every day, and some people know and some people don't.
So you mentioned the homeless outreach team.
Yeah.
Can you describe what those folks do?
Yeah, they're the cool kids. So
Yeah.
they wear orange,
Yeah.
and they drive an orange van, and they really work with people who are living unsheltered. And so people who are shelter resistant, which means they are either cannot come into shelter or right now are choosing not to come into shelter. And many times the reason that they're choosing not to come into shelter right now is because of lack of trust or relationship. And so the HOT team really works with people to create that trust and that relationship so that hopefully eventually they will come into shelter. Or sometimes they move directly. The HOT team worked with someone who moved directly to Blue Heron Place, permanent supportive housing, from the street and didn't go through shelter. And so just
what a
really
great story.
working
Yeah.
with them through those relationships and that trust building. They also work with businesses around town.
Really?
And try to help them understand the reasons and the causes of homelessness, how they can talk to people, like your question, Dave, things like that. They're a phone call that businesses can make so that they don't have to call the police.
Realizing how much time it takes to develop that trust and appreciate what HOT Team is doing in those frequent contacts. Like, I mean, it's not just, oh, they make contact with this guy and then the next time he's at Blue Heron. No, I mean, that took
years.
Yep. Years of developing it. And I think people, hear the word, oh, we have services that we're providing, and think that it happens so quickly.
No.
If I just call the HOT Team or call the POV, it's going to be, a snap of a finger.
Yeah. And whether a person is
Yeah.
living outside or indoors, trust is hard to build.
Oh, yes.
It is. And I think, sometimes, when it gets super cold outside and the POV and Johnson Street will get more full, that's because we have individuals that don't come into shelter until they have to, but at least they're coming when they have to.
So as of late, I mean, today is a rainy day, but past, say, couple weeks, it's been nice. I feel like I've seen fewer homeless people around our little building, the courthouse lawn downtown, than, let's say, this time last year. Is that accurate?
Well, we're still sleeping 100 people at the Johnson Street shelter
So
every
folks are-
night, and this
in-
is the first year it's been open at this time of year.
Okay.
So the last 3 years we closed in April.
So we're really seeing an effect.
Yeah.
Of
Yeah.
Johnson Street
Of Johnson
being open.
Street. Yeah.
So we're very grateful for that. And also recognize that for people who live in houses near Johnson Street, they're paying a price. What do you say to those folks?
We are really difficult neighbors to have. And we try really hard to do the best we can. We try to develop relationships with our neighbors. We have conversations with the people that are staying with us. And this time this year, we are trying to work on ways to encourage people to hang out at Johnson Street instead of going in the neighborhood, right? And so
things are working. I did a long bike ride yesterday down the length of Kim Williams and then up into Patty Canyon, and I saw one tent.
Well, yeah.
Only one.
Only one.
And last fall, walking to a football game, I probably saw a dozen tents.
Yep. If you know where you're going to be able to sleep that night and nobody is going to come and tell you to move, and that's in a shelter, then, and there's going to be a bed because there's enough room, then there's that security and you don't have to worry about where you're going to sleep.
So, Jill, thinking about the last 40 years, let's say less than that, even though it's just than the time that you've been there.
Yeah.
Not only is the POV seeing more people, I imagine the POV seeing a greater breadth of humanity. Are there demographic shifts? Who are we seeing out there in the population of folks who are living outside?
We're really seeing the two ends of the spectrum. So our older individuals and our younger individuals. And so we have seen over the last 2 to 3 years a 40% increase in individuals that are over the age of 60.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Really,
Wow.
if you can imagine trying to live on the rent that we have now with a Social Security check, the math doesn't add up.
Wow.
And
So you mean you have folks at the POV who are getting money every month?
Yes. I would say around 40 to 50% of people actually have income at the POV, whether it's from a job or disability or Social Security, they have income coming
They're
in.
just attempting to apply that income to the least affordable housing market in the country.
Yeah. And then the other side of the spectrum is our younger population. And so really we see a lot of that transitional age youth, so 18 to 24. And many of those are kids that are aging out of the foster care system. And so they don't have that support anymore, right? Where I could fall back on my parents. They don't have that ability. And so many times they end up in the shelter.
Explain that. So, as a foster kid, and I'm ignorant, when you're 18, that relationship is completely severed. As in, even if your foster family wanted to provide support, I don't understand how it
they
can.
want to.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so
Yeah.
the relationship has frayed, and there's no other support for that
And
child.
people who are foster parents, they're doing an incredible thing, a huge act of generosity, altering their lives. And there is a small stipend, a little bit of finances provided to attempt to take the edge off. I'm sure it does not cover all of it, but post 18, that family wouldn't get
Yeah.
any of those resources.
So then they don't have any
there's
funds coming in.
no
to be
support
able
for
to-
that
Yeah.
youth, then, either from their family or from the community.
Yeah. So really, it's the two ends of the spectrum: our older population and our youngest population.
Going back to a question Juanita asked earlier in terms of if I'm a listener or community member and want to help out, you mentioned earlier volunteers and maybe some of the challenges in terms of tapering off of some of the spirit of volunteerism that we might have seen in the community in years past. Are there opportunities? I'm assuming there are, that if someone wants to volunteer doing something at the POV, what would that look like and how would someone get engaged?
There are so many ways that you can get involved with volunteering at the POV. I would say some of my favorite ways, and the ways that I hear from people are their favorite, are doing some preparation work and serving meals in the kitchen. Really, many of the people who live in the shelter also work in the kitchen. And so if you prepare meals, you could be working alongside and really holding a conversation and hearing the story of someone who has been living there. And then serving food is always rewarding. You can go out with the homeless outreach team, which means you can go downtown with them or out to the camps with them, and that's always a favorite, to be able to spend a couple hours with them and really understand that unsheltered life. And then we also do things like big neighborhood cleanups, and so we'll have big groups that'll come in, like from a church or from a bank, and they will just spend a few hours and clean up in the neighborhood of the two shelters, which is really appreciated by the people that live in the area.
Great ideas. Thank you.
Yeah, just contact us at the POV, and we would love to set you up with a volunteer opportunity.
Yeah, I was going to say, is there anything that we haven't talked about that you want to talk about?
But I do want to talk a little bit about our 50th anniversary. and
Oh,
what we have
yeah. Talk
coming
about
up.
the 50th and,
Yeah.
and what's going on at the library right now.
Yeah, so we have a great interactive display. It sounds like Josh has been there and enjoyed it. And so that is up through the end of June, and then it is going to the Mansfield Library for a while.
All right.
And we're hoping to get it to travel around a little bit more after that. But it's beautiful. It's got 3 pillars from our mission, and then it also has the history of the POV by decade. And so really like what was happening in the 70s, what was happening in the 80s, and you can really see what was different and what is the same as what is happening now. And on the night of the 27th, we have a gala that we will be putting on the 4th floor of the library for the POV's 50th anniversary, and we would love to have as many people come as possible. We'll have food and drinks and live music and tell stories, and I think it'll be a great time.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Say the date of that again.
June 27th. It starts at 5. You can come anytime after 5.
Okay.
Awesome.
Sounds
Yeah.
great.
Great. So one other thing here, when talking about people who live outside versus people who are living inside, we heard from some of our compatriots who share our job.
Share our job in other counties, perhaps?
Yes.
Yes.
Share our job in other counties.
Our job.
Thank you. Thank you.
I've got my job shadower right here in the room. Okay.
Share our job at live and work in other counties. That we're just helping foster people who've chosen a lifestyle. What would you suggest is the best response to that?
Oh, I just don't know who would choose a lifestyle to live outside. And I know that you can have a conversation with someone and they could say, I don't want to go to shelter, or I don't want to go to housing. I want to be outside, or I am choosing this. But most of the time, if you continue that conversation, really there are things that have happened in their past where they've been told no and come up against roadblocks so many times that it is just safer for them caring for themselves to say, this is my choice and this is where I want to be, than be told no or hit those roadblocks and be disappointed again.
Thanks for that.
Yeah.
Okay, this is our last question.
Okay.
So in your recent past, have you come across some nugget of wisdom worth repeating? This can be anything from a podcast or a book, a movie, a conversation you overheard somewhere, anything you heard recently that really stuck with you.
I don't know if I have a nugget, but I do have a favorite podcast.
Oh.
Besides the agenda.
That is the right answer.
Top tier.
Usually I really like, when I don't want to think about real world stuff, I like true crime stuff.
I knew you were going to say
Yeah.
true crime. I just knew it.
But my favorite is a podcast called Pantsuit Politics. And it's 2 women
Yes,
that are talking
I'm
about
familiar.
You know it?
I do
politics.
know that.
Yeah, and I've listened to it for years, and I just love it. They do
who
a
are the
great
2
job.
women?
Beth and Sarah.
Yes,
They
I was
probably-
put onto
Yes.
this through Leadership Montana.
Oh,
Really?
I've never even
Yes.
heard of it.
They probably follow Juan.
Probably. Yeah.
I'm so embarrassed.
Definitely.
I've never heard of this podcast.
Oh,
No,
it's
it-
great. I think they do it. Whenever
wrote a
I'm
book
like,
together.
I don't
Wow.
understand
Quite good.
what is happening right now, I will go and listen to their episode because they break it down really well.
Oh, I
They're
can't
both
wait to
attorneys.
check it out.
And then put their spin on it, which is also helpful.
Right now, everyone in the room is looking at their phone. And
And looking up Pantsuit, tell them Mike put in a plug for you all.
Yeah.
And
I
they
think they
did
should
write
write
a
a
book
check.
also about something about I don't agree with you, but it's about having
it's called,
hard.
I think you're wrong,
I
but
think
I'm
you're wrong, but I'm
listening. I would
listening.
highly
Yes.
recommend this book.
Yeah.
Man, you never hear that phrase.
Yeah, I think you're wrong, but I'm listening, right? Like I'm not gonna
We
Beth
just hear, I
Silvers
think
and
you're wrong.
Sarah Stewart Holland. There
Yeah.
we go. Okay.
check it out.
But
No,
the,
that's a
the
good
books
yeah.
that you're talking about, that's
Yeah,
what they wrote. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think you're wrong, but I'm listening.
Yeah,
Wow,
it's
what a
about-
great phrase.
And talk a lot about having hard conversations with family members that don't agree with you, and yeah, it's good. Check it out.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Well, Jill,
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you.
You guys do heroic work. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Thank you
Thanks.
so much.
Thanks,
Thanks for
Jill.
your support.
You bet.
All
Goodbye.
right. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to The Agenda. If you enjoy these conversations, it would mean a lot if you'd rate and review the show on whichever podcast app you use.
And if you know a friend who would like to keep up with what's happening in local government, be sure to recommend this podcast to them.
The Agenda with the Missoula County Commissioners is made possible with support from Missoula Community Access Television, better known as MCAT, and our staff in the Missoula County Communications Division.
If you have a question or a topic you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, email it to communications@missoulacounty.us.
To find out other ways to stay up to date with what's happening in Missoula County, go to missoula.co/county updates.
Thanks for listening.